Welcome to our very first episode of The Sage and the Seeker. It's a space where you will share with us our ad-libbed conversations about soulful insights and hopefully the kind of wisdom that will help you find your way home as we discuss those things that we find will bring us to our higher selves and to find our way home as well. And I'm your co host, Antonia Dax, and I would like to introduce my co host. So, Tsung and I actually met a little while ago, and we found that we have very interesting connection. She comes from a really interesting background in tech, and there's that whole logical, intellectual side of her, but yet she's a really deeply intuitive soul. And because of these two worlds, she embodies both the precision and the presence, both intellect and intuition. And it's somewhere between these two worlds that our bond truly formed. And we come from two different worlds as well, East and West, different generations, different life paths. And when we met, it was like immediately something clicked. And the whole reason for our meeting kind of fell out the window. And we just started to talk about all these incredible personal growth, spiritual experience sorts of topics, and decided that, you know what, maybe we should share this with others. So that's what we're doing here today. And she's a coach and she brings this gift for helping other people get back to themselves with clarity and gentleness, wisdom that's ancient and fresh. And I'm really grateful to have Sung on this journey with me. Welcome.
Thank you, Antonia. So now it's my turn to introduce someone who's very dear to me, Antonia X. Antonia was my speaking coach, and from our very first session together, I felt an instant connection with Miss Tony. And what started as a coaching relationship quickly grew into something that's much deeper. We found ourselves diving into deep conversations that went far beyond any kind of voice work, talking about life and what it really means to live from the inside out. That's actually how this podcast was born, because from those very hard opening exchanges and seeing what we were discussing need to be shared with others who are also on this path. So Miss Tony is one of those rare people who really gets you. She's a beautiful mix of teacher, coach, and a spiritual guide. But even more than that, Miss Tony carries this calm, grounding presence that makes you feel completely seen and heard. So Miss Tony spent many years helping people reconnecting with their truths, whether it is student in her classes, coaching clients around the world, or in those deep soul-searching conversations that linger with you for longer. She has this quiet superpower of turning in and gently reflecting back the essence of who you are. Her own journey has taken her through trials and traumas, and she's emerged with a light that's now guiding others. Miss Tony holds space for other people to rise, to grow, and to come home with themselves. And now I'm just as grateful that we are going to walk this journey together and share this space with all of you. So, welcome, Miss Tony.
Welcome. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. I am so grateful that we have this opportunity as well to bring some light into maybe some dark places that need a little light these days and a little love.
Mhm.
So, and this is really a great place to share our topic for today. And our topic is to stop fixing and start creating. And it's a spiritual alchemy, right? How do you take that? You know what this reminded me of? Do you know the story of Rumpelstiltskin?
Tell me.
You don't know the story? It's like a childhood fairy tale. All right. Well, I won't tell the whole story, but very briefly, Is this Rumpelstiltskin's this gnarly little guy who has this gift of turning straw into gold. And he gets imprisoned by a king who says if he could do that, he could marry his daughter. Typical fairy tale story. But it came to mind because of this idea of turning straw into gold, right? There was life can seem like it's just an obstacle course full of problems to be overcome, right? But it doesn't have to be. We can look at life as if it's gold, and we can bring that, we can make it that way if we choose to do it. So that's our topic for today. What do you think about it?
I think this topic is very relevant because I feel a lot of the times the suffering arise inside of ourselves because we try to fit ourselves into a particular paradigm, a particular template, a particular role model. But we forget that what's more relevant is to bring the authentic self into this world
Mm.
and refine it. So instead of fixing yourself into some kind of mold, what you should do is refine your true art and become an alchemist of the gold that's already exists
Already in there.
there.
Yeah.
Yes. It's a process of refinement instead of fixing something that's wrong because nothing is wrong.
We're refining. We refine ore, right, into gold. I like that. And it makes me think too that it's not just about fixing what's out there. It's about fixing what's here. We're not fixing it. The view of that we have to fix out what's out there because everything's okay in here. And usually it's here that we have to start, right? We have to start with ourselves. And that changes everything that is out there. So,
Um,
well, let's look at both of those things today
yeah.
because I think they're both really vital when we are considering this topic. Well, let's start with looking at what is fixing? What are we talking about when we're talking about fixing things and why it doesn't work? I know you look at things from a mindfulness perspective so often. So, does this fit in with that, or how can we apply and define what this is from a mindfulness perspective?
So for me, I think the important part about utilizing mindfulness in this particular scenario is that you try to observe what's going on inside your internal world and see its beauty that's already existing. And instead of trying to build a system that's about punishment and reward, you build a system of choices. You treat all the external factors or informations or feedbacks just as information. And then, as someone who's mindful, you are always above all this external feedbacks and you get to use them as information to refine your choices. I think to refine your choices is another way to say you're making a mindful choices.
Something you said, I'm just thinking about, I forgot what it was. So many good things. I'm like latching on to them all. Perceiving what's out there as defining, that's what it was, as defining who you are.
Mhm.
Right. For me, a really big shift happened in my journey when I realized that I am not my past because I had been defining myself, my self esteem, my self concept, all of it. I've been defining it based on all of the experiences I had had in my life. Right. And they've not been very good. Many of them were not very good at all. And so I saw myself as sort of the victim of all of that. And so I really liked your point because when we can see that life and what is happening to us is just that happening, they're happenings. It's not who I am, right? They're happening and I'm there, right? It's not who I am. I can't define myself by the things that go on in life around me because that's when we see everything as a problem that needs fixing, right? And that's when I start to see myself as a problem that needs fixing, right?
I think eventually it goes back to how we were trained, we were brought up to believe that there's inherent good and bad. noble behaviors or evil behaviors. And we try to categorize people in different stereotypes. But in reality, we are all very complex. And there are some good lives inside us. Also, there are some bad shadow side, you might say, live inside of us too. The idea is not to feel shamed or guilty about the shadow that you carry. It's about recognize them, understand where they come from, and use that as information to make better choices, to make a choice that move you away from the shadow and into the light.
So you're getting back into like, why are we this way? Why do we see the world
Mhm.
as problems? Let me add to that because we are hardwired, we've evolved, right? Our brains have evolved over the tens of thousands of years, right? That humans have been on this earth. Our brains have evolved to look for danger and to keep us safe. And so what's a problem? Is there a problem, right? That sort of it has been genetically instilled into us. And so we've got that too, right? That there's this sense of always looking out for what's going to kill us. But these days, obviously, very few things are that dangerous. But also, and I want to hear your take on this because I grew up in the Western world. And for the past 600 years, Western society has been built on, and culture has been built on this idea that is manifest destiny thing, right? That it's man's responsibility to control this world and to conquer it and to bend it to your will, right? Which then says that the whole world is a problem that I have to,
Fix it.
right?
Yes.
And it's a very masculine energy, that whole perspective of life, but it's what is just accepted as part of the worldview in the West, right? We just believe, we grow up believing that this is just the way things are.
Hmm.
And I don't think it's served us very well, both personally or as a society. But having grown up in the East, what do you think? Is it different there?
You brought up an interesting point because I do feel over the past 100 years or so, a lot of the society in the East also trying to adopt a Western way of thinking. I have a few different ideas why it might be the case. I grew up in China. I feel probably in the Chinese narrative, it has a lot to do with the trauma, the invasion, mostly from, let's say, the British and the other European empires 100, 200 years ago. There was a wake up call in the East. We have been complacent for thousands of years. We were living in
Interesting.
comfort, and suddenly we realize there were people who are stronger than us and who took away our treasure, and we need to fight. And that survival instinct got triggered quite a bit. So I would say when I grew up, a lot of the narrative, especially when we're learning history, is about that. I would say trauma from that era. And so the narrative is all about you need to fight, you need to be stronger, you need to work harder so that you don't fall behind other country or other people.
Isn't there more of this collective ideal, whereas we're very individual in the West,
Mhm.
right? That you like are part of a greater whole that maybe doesn't look at the world so much as a problematic or at life as a problematic thing.
I would say historically, yes, the
Uh,
traditional Eastern wisdom. I think you want to talk more about that part, but I'm more talking about the contemporary ways of thinking. I think a lot of the former colonists or places like China and Japan who were not technically colonies, but they were possibly badly hurt
yeah,
during those times.
majorly affected by all of that.
Yes, I do think people still have that survival way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
But I absolutely agree. I think that historically, a lot of places like China and India, they have a lot of abundance. They have good lands, and obviously, they can nurture a lot of people. And then when you're getting nurtured, a lot of the beautiful cultures and philosophies started to.
Can thrive and
So I think I would say the more Eastern philosophy is more based on not the survival way of thinking, but more of a thinking from a place of trust, a safety, abundance.
Isn't that nice? Wouldn't that be nice if we could get back to that? So,
Exactly. I would say in the traditional ideal in Chinese philosophy, there's always that idea of we want to create equality in the society. And there's a famous
mhm.
saying that having equality is worse than everyone being poor. So there's that way of thinking, and also there's a lot of emphasis on that nothing is permanent and we are just in a process of continuous transformation. So the
I
idea
think
of fixing doesn't really make any sense because fixing means you believe there's a permanent state, a state of being good, and then you're done. I
right.
think that's very much not what the Eastern philosophy was about. I think in the Eastern philosophy, the emphasis has always been nothing is permanent and
Things will change.
we
Right, right,
emphasize this more holistic way of thinking instead of
right.
trying to feed everything into a mold.
So how does this, so we got an idea then of background, what our histories, why we are this way, that we think we need to fix things, that the world is a problem, life is a problem. So what does fixing really mean? So we looked at the idea that fixing is about seeing life as a problem and people as problems that need to be solved, and that fixing implies that we believe I'm separate from other people. If I'm not you, then you need, and you doing something to me that I don't like, then you're separate and I need to fix that. That creates problems on its own. This one we haven't really talked about, but the idea that we carry the weight of responsibility for everything. I guess it does fit with that whole manifest destiny thing. Like I have to control everything in my life, right? And that's saying that you're trying to control things that you obviously have no control over. And that fixing is rooted in control, judgment, and fear. And you mentioned the judgment before. You're just talking about that, how we're seeing other people as different and right or wrong. And the whole fear thing is about survival, right? So the need to fix things because I'm afraid of what will happen to me or if I don't make it go my way. So
Exactly.
that's what fixing is about.
Beautiful.
Let's take just really quickly look at what are the problems that it creates. But these are the situations that happen when we look at the world through that lens, right? Through that perspective that everything is a problem that needs to be fixed, that I have to fix.
And I think when we're trying to fix something, we always chase an ideal that seems static. But like I mentioned earlier, we're always changing, and the human dynamics are very complex. If you try to chase something that's static in a very dynamic world, you're never going to find the balance and peace.
And I like I think that the point on there that puts you in the role of a victim or the perpetrator. And both of those roles are weak, right? If you go through life thinking that the universe is out to get me, why does this always happen to me? I keep fixing things, and as soon as I fix something, that just becomes more of a problem, right? And I can never get anywhere. That's being the victim role, right? Taking on the victim role. And then you start seeing yourself that way, and you see everything in life that way. And that's what you end up then living as, right? You're creating that kind of a world for yourself. And if you're on the other side and you're the perpetrator, you're always the one that's pushing people to do things the way you want them to, being overly controlling, right? Trying to be in control and managing everything all the time. That also puts you in this position of seeing that you are responsible for everything, and then things don't go your way, right? So you get angry and you just take it out more on other people or whatever it might be, right? Whatever your patterns are. Either one, both of them are places of weakness that result in seeing the world this way. Here's a problem. This person's a problem. I got to fix them, right? Or I need fixing because nothing I do ever works out. So I think that really speaks to our perspective about life. And it's all about perspective, isn't it? It's all about, it's an inside job. If we want to change our world, if we want to create a world that is right for us as individuals, right? Like create your world for yourself. If you want to create a world that is what you want it to be, it's got to start with a perspective shift.
Absolutely. I also want to share that when you truly have the safety and confidence about yourself, you tend to see less problem in other people. You also tend to see more of the bright side of the things. Because a lot of times what you see in the world is a reflection of your internal process. We might be amazed, but I think a lot of researchers has proved that as a human being, we are very biased in choosing what we want to see and hear.
We don't realize it. I think that's part of the thing. We just don't realize we're doing it,
So
right?
that's
Yeah.
why I feel so passionate about the topic of mindfulness because it is exactly the practice of getting out of your habitual way of seeing things and hearing things, but
Mhm.
allow more voices, allow more sceneries to show up in your life. Although you might actually still be living similar life, meeting with similar people, working in similar dynamic, but it is you who choose what you want to hear and see.
Change. And
You,
that gets reflected back to you.
if you see yourself as a big problem that needs to be fixed, you will see anywhere around in your world.
Problems.
Yes.
Ram Dass is one of the teachers that I love and have learned a lot from. He used to tell this story about the car full of people driving on a road trip, and they pull into this town to drive through the town. And he says that one person in the car is really hungry, and all that person sees are restaurants, possibilities, places for food, right? And that the driver of the car knows they're getting low on gas. And so all he's looking for are gas stations, right? And another person in the car is really horny. This is his story. Now my other person is really horny, and all they're looking for is somebody they can make, right? Where's a sexy person walking down the street or whatever, right? So by the time they leave that town, they've had completely different experiences of that town, right? What they saw, what they understood that town to be about was completely different from each other. One only saw the lack of restaurants, and the other one only saw they didn't have any gas stations, and right, whatever. So it's what we see is what we believe is true,
Mhm.
right? You see it to believe it. It's a big thing, isn't it? That we just assume that what we see is true, but it's not. We
Yeah.
only see what we choose to see. We're so affected by things subconsciously,
Mhm.
right? Affected by things that we don't even recognize that it's coloring the way we see the world.
To add a mindfulness twist to the story, and I imagine, let's say, Zen master, the same town, in the same car, they might see, oh, the beautiful scenery, the mountains, the rivers, the bird sounds, and they might see beauty in living in a simplistic way. They might see the more sincere human interaction between people when there's
Mm-hmm.
distraction, and they might see it as a very beautiful place.
There you go. So it's really you're predisposed to see. And our expectations, I think, are a big part of that too, what we expect. So this is a good place then to start shifting over to how do we stop looking at the world as a problem and that we have to fix, and how do we shift into creating, and what is creating? What does that look like? Right. I was thinking about that this morning, that there's layers to it. And broadly, I think we can look at it in two layers. There's this transition period where we have to train ourselves, right, to make this shift, to train ourselves to recognize what we're doing that's not helping us and to start to see what is and to shift our thinking and our patterns and all of that. And then once we've gotten to a certain point, then there's this level of understanding of how we create without that stuff getting in the way. And then it's things really open up.
Mhm.
So, can we look at it from those two perspectives?
Sure.
Start with that because I think that mindfulness and other kinds of practices can really help us to make that shift. So, what are some of the things that we can do that are practical things? Where do we start? Let's say people listening right now, watching, are saying, I love the idea, but what do I do? right? Where do they start? And then once they start, what's the progression?
I would say you start by a personal mantra or affirmation to tell you that, hey, I'm wholesome, I'm good. I might have ways to improve myself, but I accept who I am right now and I
So it
love.
starts with your with understanding yourself and loving yourself, and
Absolutely.
not with how do I do anything out there, right? Because it's not about what's out there.
I truly believe the outside world is really just a reflection of what's going on inside.
Okay.
So it will be good,
Yeah.
always good to always work from the inside. At different point, we touched the topic of about survival, about feeling safe. I think eventually the key is to make yourself feel safe in this world. If you started to trust that it's going to be okay, no matter how difficult or challenging it might seem, you
That
start,
I'm okay.
yes,
I'm okay, regardless of what happens out there. I'm always going to be okay.
but I'm not talking about from a point of ignorance. I'm talking about
Uh-huh.
your trust in yourself that you are safe.
That's a
And
good.
from there, you can actually start working on a solution or a plan for improvement using all the skills, all the capacities, all the intelligence, all the emotional resilience, all the action taking uh, tendencies that's very natural to every one of us to improve from there. So if you focus too much on something is wrong, then you go back to that survival mode that I'm not safe, preserve myself in that extreme situation. But if you can
Okay.
start from a place of trust, you will know that you always have enough time. You will know that you will always have enough chances to get to where you want to be. And then you actually focus on what you can do instead of what's needed for survival, which is a
Mhm.
much healthier dynamic than
Mhm.
thinking that I want to fix something, the world is wrong.
I think a lot of it is about recognizing your thought patterns. Was for me is recognizing that in how we react to things rather than respond to things. And reacting has become so impulsive,
Mhm.
right? That we don't even think about it. We just do. And the same kind of reactions come up in the same kind of situations over and over again. And we just say, well, that's who I am, or that's how I do things. And we don't question it at all, right? But I think mindfulness really helps us begin question, just at least to pay attention, to recognize that this just happened and I just did that. And was that really the right thing for me? Does that really serve me in any way? Right? You start to realize, you know what, it doesn't. Why do I do that? I don't want to keep doing that. I wanted to do some. I have, you know what? I have a little story about it was a woman. She was feeling very negatively about herself. Her self esteem was really low, right? And she'd just been through a bad breakup and just after a series of many in her life. And she'd gained a lot of weight. She was trying to get back into it, but she just didn't have it, right? So she started walking and to get healthier. And she was out for a walk and a car slowed down next to her and a guy yelled out at her from the car. And he said, hey, sweetie, you need a ride? And this is an older woman, right? Her first instinct was, oh my God, somebody's interested in me, right? But what she said was, nope, thanks, I'm good, right? And she kept walking. She couldn't even look at the guy. She just kept walking, right? So he's like, oh, and the guy pulls away. And she's like, she's getting all flustered. And she's like, oh my God, what just happened? And she realized that her first instinct was to think, I still got it.
Mhm.
Somebody finds me attractive, right? I could maybe, if that guy came by again, I could talk to him. And then she was like, wait a minute, this is not good for me,
Mhm.
right? And it helped her to stop to see that mindfulness, right? What did I just think? And why did I just say that? And what did I, right? And she realized afterwards that the guy was a creep, right? That somebody who's going to do that doesn't care about you, right? And it's okay to feel like, hey, maybe I still got it. There's nothing wrong with that. right? But the fact that she would have been willing just to get some attention, just to have, right, some self-esteem, that she'd be willing to put herself in danger in order to do that, right? Even if it didn't seem like a big danger, she didn't recognize initially that this guy was a creep. And anybody who's going to stop and try to pick you up as you're walking down the street, right, is like a creep. You just not something you want to do, right? So
So,
if we don't have that practice mindfulness, we don't stop and catch these things. We don't catch the thoughts. We don't catch the reactions. We don't question them.
and you can always go deeper, like in this story, whether this guy is a creep or not. You can also think about if there's part of her that couldn't own that she's attractive and beautiful. She doesn't have to get on the car, but she can show some confidence and say, I know I'm beautiful.
Right? She
Yeah,
can own
yeah.
that part.
So there are different ways to look at this story, and you
There are,
look at it as a story of using your intuition. That although I have that first reaction that hey, I still got this, but maybe your intuitive side tell you that hey, this is leading to some potential danger. So there are many ways
right.
that people are
You have
mindful.
to listen. You have to listen and see the whole picture, right? Which, if you're not bringing awareness to what you're thinking or saying or doing, then you can't see the whole picture, right? You only see your instinctive reactions, and that's it, right?
Absolutely, it will help you in any given moment to transform your tendency to react into a graceful response. You're seeing all of these possibilities, all of these choices in front of you
Yes.
in that split of a second, and then you say, you know what, my best response is A, B, C, X, Y, Z. That's the whole point of being mindful, seeing the whole picture. It's going to help us to create a world that we want.
So let's talk about some practical things really quickly. Choosing your response with intention. What do you intend? What is know ahead of time what is right for you and intend that?
Tony, the story you just shared is exactly what these 2 points are about, right? You tune into your wisdom of how to respond in that particular moment. Even some of the responses a little bit counterintuitive or not something that you normally would do, you still can trust unconditionally about yourself, having the best interest for yourself.
Mhm.
We just talked about we need to hold that sacred second between you receive the information and you make a choice of action. Make sure that you always have a pause. Maybe at the beginning, it takes longer for you to hold that pause. But the more you practice mindfulness, the more you will see the whole picture in a shorter amount of time. And then you can respond accordingly.
I think that pause is really important because we can get so caught up emotional responses come quickly, right? And those emotional responses, we can get lost in them.
Mhm.
And if we don't take that pause and realize that there is this emotional response happening, and that's okay, but I don't want to let it cloud my thinking. I don't want to let it guide my decisions, right? It takes that moment to recognize what's happening in my body, what am I thinking, what is right now for me,
Mhm.
and it's something we're not really trained to do, but I think we can train ourselves, right, to take that pause.
Yeah, and I would say going back to the original comment about trusting yourself and feeling safe in your body, that's a great foundation for you to start
Uh-huh.
training yourself to respond instead of react. Because when you don't
Right.
feel safe, obviously any situation can be a survival situation for you. Your hormone level start to rise. You just react in a way as if you're in danger, but in 99% of the time. Um,
Yeah,
you're absolutely
that's a
safe.
good point. That's how this is a good way to start to feel safe within yourself
Hmm.
by recognizing what's happening and that it doesn't have to control you, that you, that it doesn't control is actually the one that is all okay, if that makes sense.
And also, I would say a lot of people just don't feel safe. I want to wait for the outcome to show that I deserve to feel safe. I want to wait for the
Wow.
right person to save me,
Yeah.
situation, right timing. That's an excuse. That's that's not taking ownership of the power.
And it's not going to ever happen, right? Because if you keep looking for validation from outside for anything, whether it's for your self-esteem or whether for it's your safety or whatever it might be, if you keep looking for something else to give that to you,
Mhm.
you're always going to be on the edge. You're always going to be fearful of either not getting it, or if you get it, of you're going to be fearful of losing it, right? And that's no way to be. It has to come from within. It's an inside job. I always say that it's an inside job.
Yeah. People might think it starts from the outside. You see results and then you say, oh, now I can feel safe. But it's actually, it starts from inside. You feel safe first. And then you present yourself in the world in a confident way. Then you create greater outcome and get
Yes.
yourself surrounded by the people that you want to associate it with.
Which actually is that tipping point, right? If you do these different practices and you get better at them and you learn the skills, you learn that you're not here to fix things, but to shape things,
Mhm.
right? And you start to see that takes us into that next section is when you start to see how you're creating your world, right? Once you've gotten out of this reacting and impulse
Mhm.
and just feeling that you're being battered around by life, and you start feeling safe in yourself and understanding yourself and all of that,
Mhm.
that's when I think there's a tipping point somewhere where you start to recognize that, oh, I created, because you're creating all the time, right? You're never not creating.
Mhm.
It's just that you're creating without awareness,
Mhm.
right? And so everything is random. But when you start realizing that through this process, you've been creating better things for your life. And then you start, I remember there was a moment where I realized that I was walking in my creation,
Mhm.
that like things, the positive, the healthy things that I wanted, that I chose for my life, that I intended for my life, that I had written affirmations about. You mentioned those early on, right? I'd written affirmations for these things. And I realized one day that I was actually walking in those things. They actually came about, they came true. And that was like, oh my gosh, it was a big moment for me because it was like, you know what? I'm doing it. It's working.
Mhm.
I've shifted the way I look at life and I've shifted the way that life looks at me because of it. Right.
Yeah.
And I think then that takes us into this more of a energetic, what is it really about? And how can we consciously, with awareness, choose and create the kind of life that we want?
Yes. And the other way to think about it is shifting the mindset from controlling to participating. World is ever changing, human dynamics are impermanent. To think about having control is think about grabbing sands in your hand tightly. And instead of doing that, what you should do is participating in the world with curiosity, with drive to create, to shape, and to own your space in that process of participation.
I think so much of that stems from getting to know your true, authentic self. And that's probably a topic for another day. But I think it's pertinent because we think we know who we are, but most of that is just the reacting self, right? That has learned how to do the right thing, that has been conditioned to respond and react a certain way. And that we so often just see ourselves as the roles that we play, which are based on the expectations other people put upon us, right? And when you start to really question yourself and find that safety in yourself and that sense of pure truth, you really start to find yourself. That can be a real process to do that, but it's a wonderful process. And once you find yourself in there, then how you present to the world becomes clear, right? And it's that clarity, I think, that is what creates the world around us.
Mhm.
Because all this other stuff is gunk that just like you've layered on yourself or other people have layered on you, just that you see the world through all that stuff. And when you clear it away, there's a lot of subconscious stuff that comes up with this, right? When you clear it away, then it's like, here I am, right? And then the world, and you're what you're supposed to be in flow of existence, right? And that's then everything can flow through you and you can flow with it so much easier than if you're looking at it through all this problems everywhere. And that's when you really start to create, I think, for the whole idea of manifesting
Mhm.
and the law of attraction stuff, right? That it can't really happen until you get, I think, to this place of clarity.
And trust.
Trust in yourself as well as trust that it's all okay. It's all okay. There's nothing to fix in the end, right?
You have all the power to create your reality, create a better world. Just focus on what matters.
So, what matters? Let's talk about that. What does matter? How do we know what matters?
I think it eventually will tie back to what you think your life's purpose is. I'm recently working on this topic because I need to give a talk on this.
Ah,
To answer what matters, you need to answer 7 different questions. The first one is, who do you want to serve? The second one is, what am I creating? The third one is, what am I doing? The fourth one is, what do I know? The fifth one is, what story am I telling? The sixth one is, how do I see me in this world? And lastly, I think this one basically rules all the other questions, is where do you want the world to go? And then be the change that you want.
those are great. I think it's about choice, isn't
I
it?
think a lot of times we get lost by a lot of the distractions that we see in our world. We might forget what exactly we want the world to be. If you guide all your behavior, all your decisions based on that North Star, where do you want the world to go? You will see your actions being evaluated by your own standard. And if you do things that's not aligned with how you want the world to go, then change it.
And I think there's a big question that we need to ask ourselves about what we think we want, what we're choosing.
Yeah.
Because so often what we think we want isn't really what we want,
Mhm.
right? There's this way of looking at it, and I let me just share what it is, and I would just challenge you to do it after you've watched the video, but take time to do it. So the idea is that you might say that, well, what I really want is a house. I really want a house, and it's got to have like 3 bedrooms and whatever. There's like it's a certain kind of house, and then you have to ask yourself the question, why that house,
Mhm.
right? And you might say then, well, because my house isn't big enough. Well, why isn't your house big enough? Right? Say, well, because I need to have my mother living with me. Well, why do you need to have your mother living with you? So the question is always why, right? You need to break it down.
Yeah,
And so you might say, well, I need to have my mother living with me because she's getting old and she really needs help. Well, why do you think you want to help her? Why in your house, right?
that gets to your purpose and value question.
It's to the value, right? What really matters. And if you
Yeah.
keep asking why, what happens is you end up with a feeling or an energy level, right? That maybe you can't even put words to. If you really go deep enough,
Mhm.
right? It's because I love my mother, because I miss my mother, because I want to spend time with my mother, whatever it might be, that you get down to, well, why is that? It's because it's just this, right? And I think that's where we need to get to. All of the other stuff is window dressing.
Exactly. That's why I call it North Star. I'm not calling it byproduct because a lot of times I think what happens is we chase after the byproduct, not the real value. So in this particular example, the real value is person want to serve and then staying connected with their aging parents. It's a way of service. The service is truly what they look after. I'm not saying that having a 3 bedroom house is not important in this case, but you should chase after your North Star, which is to serve.
Yes.
And if you do it right, and it turns out that big house is necessary for you to serve better, then it will show up. That's how manifestation.
Hmm. Or it might show up as something completely different that you never even thought might happen.
Yeah.
right? Something else entirely might happen and you're
It's
still
a
met.
different type of fixing your mind onto some unimportant details rather than your mission. Your
Other than that North Star. And I like that term for it. So that North Star comes down to being really an energetic, emotional vibration, whatever you want to call it, right? That is what really matters. And I think if you can do that with all the things in your life that you think you want and focus on what you're going to create, it's going to come some way or the other. And if you stay open to say, well, it doesn't have to be this 3 bedroom house in this neighborhood or whatever, then it'll come in some way.
Mhm.
And you'll probably, I have found that the way it ends up coming is way better than anything I imagined it could be. And so many people say that, right? That's how it works. So, all right, well, we're about out of time. Is there anything that you think could be a sort of a challenge or action that people could take starting today that would help them stop fixing and start creating?
Start loving yourself, trusting yourself, make yourself comfortable in any situation, and not to be bothered by them, focusing on your North Star instead.
I love that. And I would add to that one thing that make that the most important thing you can do for yourself. Choose that above everything else, and everything else will just start to fall into place if you stay on that path. All right. Well, I hope that you enjoyed our conversation today and that you maybe picked up even just one little thing out of it that could be meaningful for you, that you can maybe implement in your own life and help you to move away from fixing and into creating the life that you choose for yourself.
Absolutely. In the following sessions, we can discuss more nuanced topics about how to find your North Star, how to
Mhm.
stay connected even in stressful situations. And there are many aspects that we can explore.
Absolutely. And please put in the comments anything that you may have found useful today, anything that you would maybe like to hear us discuss in the future, and any insights that you might have had because of our conversation. We'd love to see them.
Yes.
And like and subscribe, right? Follow us anywhere. All that good stuff. You know what to do.
Yes.
Stay connected.